Welcome back once again to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett. That's EJ. Talking Bengals today. Start of AFC North week, which means we are officially 75% of the way through this series. What did we do first? South? No. East? We did East first, then South. Just wrapped up both of the West divisions. Now we're moving north to finish this whole thing off. And the AFC North, in particular, might be the best division in all of football, as evidenced by the fact that the quote-unquote worst team, because we always go worst to first in the standings, the worst team was the Super Bowl contender Cincinnati Bengals, and that's who we're starting with this week.
I think the North, in terms of the directions in the country, might be the strongest quarter in football in the country.
Oh, yeah. Between the AFC and the NFC, there's probably going to be, 6-7 playoff teams just from this region across both conferences.
Yeah, for years we've said that the AFC North is an absolute street fight, that they beat the hell out of each other every week. It's been true, will continue to be true. NFC North's been a little bit down on its luck. We'll talk about them next week. Not the case anymore.
It's a remarkably talented team, which I do not think is going to finish fourth in the division again this year. God willing. If they finish fourth again, it's because Joe got hurt again. So, again, knock on wood. Don't think that's going to happen. But this is not your normal last place team. This is a very rare last place team in the sense that they probably went up a register for that one. Probably should have been either first or second.
Very talented team, very talented quarterback, very talented rest of the roster. This isn't one of those rosters where you have an incredibly talented quarterback and there's a lot of holes elsewhere we're just kind of plastering over. No, it's Duke Tobin and his staff, we'll talk about him later, have done an incredible job of building this roster from the time that Burrow was selected as rookie, when you could have said that. The quarterback's really good, but they've got some holes. They've continued to fill. They are at the top of the AFC in terms of the power structure. They have done remarkably well against the best team in the NFL, the Chiefs. And look, if you get Burrow back healthy, they've kept their pieces intact largely. We'll talk about all those losses as we go through this. They're not going to be fourth outside of something catastrophic.
Which I think we also said that last year too. And then, of course, something catastrophic happened. But
wasn't on us, folks.
This year, we promise. This is the one. Before we dive into 2023, by the way, which will be a quick look because I'm kind of throwing that whole season out. It doesn't really count in my book. But before we get into that, I do want to thank Underdog Fantasy for helping to make this series possible in the first place. We have been biding our time waiting for the AFC North for basically like 6 weeks now, and I'm happy we're finally here. But we wouldn't have made it this far in the series, at least paying for everything that it costs to make this series without the support of Underdog, and also without the support of you guys supporting Underdog so that they keep coming back and paying for more. Like, they're our primary sponsor for a reason. They make everything go here. But again, thank you to Underdog. If you guys don't play on Underdog already and you're interested in doing some season-long pick'ems, you don't have to wait until week 1 to do pick'ems. They have them for the entire season right now, especially for the Bengals. They have a whole bunch of options. So, like Joe Burrow's sitting at 4,050 yards on the year, which feels like they're building in the possibility of maybe not starting 17 games. But if he does start 17 games, I can't imagine he's under 4K. So I'm going to push higher on that one just for optimism's sake. He's also at 28.5 touchdowns, which feels low. Again, push higher on that one for optimism's sake. Jamar Chase, I think, is at like 1,300 something yards. T. Higgins is at, actually, hold on, I remember T. I was like, whoa, that seems low. Let's see, he was 875.5. So, again, there's some juicy options here.
Got to take them where you can get them. Again, we're recording this early in July. Those are going to stay the same. However, as we talk about ADPs later and drafting players, those will flex out, so you'll need to check those. But yeah, please give Underdog some support. They give us a lot of support, and you wouldn't get all of this content without it.
You can, of course, find them in the link in the description or at the QR code on the screen. If you use promo code BOOTLEG when you sign up, you'll get up to $250 in bonus cash and a free pick'em special in the lobby. So once again, thank you to Underdog for making all this work. And with that, EJ, briefly, he says, with emphasis, briefly, let's go through 2023.
We're not going to dwell on it. 2023 is a I don't want to say a unique situation. Bengals fans hope it's a unique situation. They don't want to see Burrow injured again. But what I am going to take away from 2023 that does matter to me is even though that happened and they played without their starter for the majority of the year, they still won 9 games.
Yeah.
This isn't a team that just said, oh, forget it. Starter's hurt. We're done. We're going to win 6 and just walk it off to next year. Like, they did a tremendous job with what they had. 9-8 overall. Again, 4th in the division, not as important. Home record 6-3, even with everything that happened. Very impressive mark. Road games 3-5. In the last 5 games, 3-2. They were still tough down the stretch. They had morphed their offense, which is the mark of really good coaching. Right? They didn't just go, oh, well, we're going to try and do everything we do with Burrow, even though he's not here, because they wouldn't have won a lot of games if that was the case. They said, all right, what can Browning do? What can we do to make up for that? How can we get this in the aggregate? And they did manage to do that for the most part. Yes, 4th in the division is one thing, but it's also, as we said at the top, one of the toughest divisions in football. They almost won double-digit games, and yeah, they came in 4th, but we're not going to put a ton of stock in that. So we've got a couple of measures for you. The first one is QBS, or quarterback support. It's a metric I developed with...
Which is just a fancy word for made up.
For made up, right? Imagined and brought to life over about 3 months during last season with Arjun Menon, who now works for the Jets in an analytics capacity. And it's 5 statistics that really help tell the story of how a team set the table for their quarterback to succeed. There's 3 offensive statistics, a defensive one, and a special teams one. It's a 0 to 100 scale. 0 is the worst, 100 is the best. And on that scale, Cincinnati was a 6.4.
And they still won 9 games.
And they won 9 games.
That's incredible.
Right. So a 6.4 on the QBS scale of 0 to 100 was 30th out of 32 teams.
They should have been so much more ass than they were.
Correct.
In fact, they weren't ass, and that's the point.
That is completely the point, is the amount of support they provided for their quarterback was really low, and they still won 9 games. It's an impressive statistic. So if QBS is how they set the table, Power Score is how they actually performed. We take, again, 6 of their league ranks: rushing offense, passing offense, rush defense, pass defense, points scored, and points allowed. We just average them out. And again, everybody would like to be first in all of those, so a lower score is better in Power Score. The Bengals' Power Score was 19.5, and that was 24th overall in the league. So 30th amount of support, 24th overall in terms of results. They overperformed for how they set the table.
And when you're looking at how, the QBS metric is built, it's built off of pass blocking efficiency, non-quarterback rush offense EPA, which wasn't great. The offensive line wasn't great. It's built off of the rate of receivers' routes being quote unquote perfectly covered, which is kind of a measure of not necessarily quality of receivers, but just like how well the scheme is doing at just kind of getting guys open, because when a receiver is getting open, generally it's going to be against zone coverage. The majority of coverage in the NFL is zone coverage, like 75% is the average. So, you get good receivers that are good at separating against man coverage for like the 25% of plays you face that are against man coverage. For everything else, it's on the coach. That's about scheme. It's about getting guys in good matchups. It's about getting guys in position where they can work against leverage. And they weren't super good at that last year. Not gonna lie, wasn't great. Now, again, I still thought Callahan was a very good coach overall. I obviously think Taylor's a good coach overall, but they didn't really give Browning a lot to work with, if we're being 100% honest with ourselves, and Browning still made it work to the best of his ability. Obviously, Burrow makes it work even better because he's Burrow. But the fact that this team, as far as the key metrics for supporting a quarterback, were that horrible, and they only ended up being below average, that's pretty impressive.
So the Bengals at +6, the differential between their QBS score and their Power Score, how they set the table and how they did, tied for the 5th biggest positive differential in the league.
Yeah, I believe it, because that team should not have won 9 games.
Correct.
Like, absolutely, unequivocally should not have won 9. They're like the Bizarro Falcons.
Yes, they are.
Like, 100%. It was just a masterful job by that whole staff to just keep the boat afloat. And the fact that we even had conversations, about like, can Jake Browning take the Bengals to the playoffs? Like, the fact that it was even a topic
that it was
on
attainable.
sports TV, that's pretty incredible. So shout out to everybody in that building for making it work last year. Nobody had any realistic expectations for Cincy once Burrow was done. But they never gave up. They fought hard. They were respectable to the end. I think that's all Bengals fans could really hope for. And I'm sure most Bengals fans were kind of checked out to 2024 once Joe got hurt anyway. So, again, if nothing else, they were damn good TV. It does kind of make it hard to project 2024 because we can't really use 2023 as any sort of leading indicator of where they're going to go this year, because nothing from last year really translates, right? Different quarterback, different offensive line, different OC. Like, it can't really use last year. So we're going to keep the projection for 2024 light in terms of schematic tendencies and everything like that. All I know is that more likely than not, they're going to stick with, a lot of the gap run scheme stuff that they've been doing the last couple of years, because that's been effective for them. They moved away from a zone run scheme to a gap scheme like mid-season a couple of years ago, and it was very, very effective for them. So I have to imagine, considering the size of their tackles, they're probably going to stick with that because that's what they're best at. As far as how many guys they're going to keep in pass pro, Burrow has long favored 5-man pass protections and only using a 6-man if he actually absolutely has to. But as far as the rate of 5-man pass pro, like, they were literally only behind Tampa and Kansas City a couple years ago in Burrow's last healthy year. So the man loves 5-man pass protection, which means he really just loves 5 guys out running routes so that he can read space and manipulate space and kind of do his Burrow thing, right? He's a serial killer. You want to rush 5 or 6 guys against empty protection? He's one of the few guys that can kill you repeatedly if you do that. So I would say not unique, because Brady obviously made a living doing that for 2 decades, but rare skill set, right? To operate in chaos behind 5-man pass pro when historically a lot of the guys in that pass pro are not super great at it. Handling blitzes basically all by his damn self, reading space, working that space, finding matchups, and just pulling the trigger quicker than literally anybody alive can get to him off the edge. Remember, his average time to throw a couple of years ago was 2.52 seconds. Like, sorry. Like, nobody's getting home that quick. So he kind of is his own pass protection in that regard. So he just has a rare skill set in terms of how he pass protects for himself, just with his play style. I imagine that's going to continue as well into 2024, because that just doesn't go away. It's what he is. Beyond that, though, I got nothing. I have no idea how this offense is going to operate beyond Burrow getting it out quick and them using gap scheme runs. That's about all I got.
I think they're probably going to lean even more heavily into Burrow's characteristics of managing the rush that way and liking multiple targets. Because if anything, they've downgraded their run game. So leaning on it more doesn't tend to make sense to me. Like, when they run, they'll run that way. Do you think they're going to do that more than saying, here, Joe, go win us the game?
Probably not.
Probably not. So I would say, if anything, it's even going to get turned up a little bit. And, from his first year in the league, that's been sort of his keynote. It's the way he came in. He's like, I don't really care if the protection's not that great. I'm going to go out and beat people anyways. And this is how I'm going to do it. He's never really moved off of that. And I don't think he needs to. If he's healthy, he is one of the best in the league at doing it. And I think they're going to lean heavily into that.
It's Burrow ball.
It is Burrow ball.
And there's very few quarterbacks ever that I think play Burrow ball like Burrow. And one of them is the greatest of all time. Yeah. In fact, in the NFL, I can really only think of like 3 right now that I think could play that style behind that line and make it work. And it's obviously Patrick Mahomes because he's Patrick Mahomes. Probably Josh Allen because he's Josh Allen. Brock, which I know that might shock some people, but go back and listen to the 49ers episode. A lot of what we just said about Burrow is how
I was going to say, it's remarkably similar.
And maybe Lamar and Stroud. And that's like the 5 that I think could make that work. Actually, maybe not even Stroud, because they were pretty heavy on 6 and 7-man protections to kind of get him acclimated last year. We didn't actually see a whole lot of 5-man from them. So, yeah, maybe that's the list. Maybe it's just Burrow, Lamar, Allen, and Mahomes, and Brock that can do that and live. It's a pretty short list.
Pretty good list to be on. Not only short, but high quality. So it'll be fascinating to see whenever there's a change at offensive coordinator and not at head coach. You generally think that the major themes are going to continue, but you can't guarantee that. So it will be very, very interesting to watch for Bengals fans and all the rest of us as well to see what parts carry over specifically, what Burrow gets asked to do more or allowed to do more, and what they move away from that we really have come to think of as tenets of their offense.
By the end of September, into October, we'll probably have a good idea. And I promise Bengals fans, we will talk about it around that time once we know what the hell we're even talking about. But it'd be kind of irresponsible for us to project right now because we literally don't know. What we do know is defense. Lou Anarumo, back at it again. He has a very distinctive style, I would say at this point, which is letting his corners be either the reason for success or failure of this defense. And I mean that both in a positive and a negative way. He will give them chances to thrive and survive in man coverage. And they play a lot of man coverage. They were 7th highest in cover 1 last year. They will call a bunch of man pressures. And again, trust that they're going to hold up on the outside while we try to get home. They will play some cover 2, but it's a very aggressive style of cover 2 with guys moving all over the place and switching responsibilities. They'll play 2 roll, they'll play 2 invert. Cover 2 is not just cover 2 for them. So again, it asks a lot of these guys. These corners are not just jamming the receiver and then playing the flat. Sometimes they gotta haul ass and get deep because all of a sudden they're gonna be the deep half player. But it puts a lot on the corners. Some defenses, okay, we're gonna play cover 3 all day and we're gonna protect these guys. Not so in Cincy. And last year, that kind of bit them in the ass, at least a lot more than in previous years in this system. DJ Turner struggled a lot as a rookie, especially in man coverage, didn't go super well. To be honest, none of their corners really played well in man other than Cam Taylor-Britt, because he's Cam Taylor-Britt. All the other guys really struggled. Awuzie, who's gone now, got lit up pretty frequently. Again, like I said, DJ Turner got lit up. And they live by the sword and die by the sword. They're probably going to do it again this year and just trust that their guys bounce back. There's one thing I do know, though. It's that Lou's not going to go a full season and a half just playing the same thing and saying, well, that's not going to work. If they get lit up again in the first, 4 or 5 weeks, just like we said, there's going to be an adjustment period for the offense. If they get lit up in the first month of the year again and they realize they cannot play man coverage again, I have to assume Lou will make adjustments there because he's a very good DC. But he's at least going to give his guys a shot to prove they can do it. And if they do bounce back, and they're a lot better in man this year than last year, baby, gloves coming off. Because this front 4 is vicious. And if the secondary is holding up even just a little bit, just give Trey just a little extra time, they're going to win up front.
I was going to say, they're going to have a major helping hand, they being the secondary, with this defensive line. But, uncharacteristically down the stretch last season, Lou Anarumo's defense, someone we have absolutely heralded on this podcast for several years as one of the best DCs, it was a little harder to blow that trumpet really loud in the second half of last year. It's what's happening to Lou's defense? They are not who we've come to expect them to be, and that happens with all coordinators. That's not a shot at Lou or Cincinnati or anything else. That was this isn't typical, so I'm with you. I believe they are going to bounce back largely because of the support they're getting from the rush, because pass rush supports coverage and vice versa. We'll see, but I am confident that he's not going to go a whole season and just throw up his hands. That is antithetical to everything we know about Lou.
He'll give his guys a chance to prove him right. Not prove him wrong, prove him right.
Right.
Because he believes in them.
Come with me, guys.
He'll give his guys a shot. Again, they were 7th in cover 1 last year, like I said. They were 8th in cover 2. Everything else, they were below average. They were, hold on, I got the exact numbers. They were 19th in cover 3, 28th in quarters, 24th in quarter half. They had 4 different corners with 400-plus snaps. Like, they were in 4-2-5 nickel more than pretty much everybody else, playing man coverage more than pretty much everybody else. Live by the sword, die by the sword, baby. Either they do it or they don't. I'm curious to see what his adjustments are if it doesn't work.
Right.
But they're at least going to try it. That much I know for sure.
Yeah, I think they'll stack it up and run what they brung again with a refreshed offseason, but I don't think it's going to be functionally different early on.
Well, with all that said, and again, we love Lou Anarumo. It's not us talking shit about him. It's just valid criticisms. But with all that said, let's talk about the rest of the coaching staff and the front office, because once again, as far as bang for your buck, probably the best way to phrase it, Bengals are pretty darn stacked in headquarters today.
Yeah, and they're very efficient, as you've said. They run it literally differently than any other team in the NFL.
Lean and mean, baby.
There is not another team with this power structure. So Duke Tobin is the de facto GM. It's not his title, but it is his role. He runs or oversees one of the smallest scouting and recruiting staffs, pro and college, in all of the NFL. And they like it that way. They don't see that as a limitation or something lesser. They've built it to overload them, and they like it that way is the best way to describe that. They all have to do more and interact more because they all have multiple roles, but they like that sense of a small, somewhat closed shop where everybody has to do everything, and they'll take the trade-offs. And they've been very successful in doing that. So although it's different, doesn't mean it's bad, but it is unique in the fact that nobody else in the NFL runs it that way. And they've found success with it. A lot of teams, after the success they had in the past couple of years, have said, should we streamline a little bit? Do we need 35 people in our, pro personnel scouting? And I don't know how many teams adjusted based on that, but everybody looked at Cincinnati's success really a year before they thought they should have it and said, I don't know, maybe we could do a little bit of that. So certainly a model that has been impactful in the NFL, even if it's not changing paradigms. It's worked for Cincinnati, and it's largely because of Duke Tobin. Zach Taylor, we talked about him as the head coach already. Coordinators, the new OC is Dan Pitcher. 9th year with Cincinnati, so he's not new with the Bengals, but new in the role. First as OC. Has coached the quarterbacks for the last 4 years, so that's his entry into now calling the whole mess on the offensive side. And again, is well schooled in what they have done. What he's going to do now that he has the reins in his hands,
we'll see.
We'll see.
It's whatever Joe wants, honestly, because he's worked with Joe for years. So I'm sure they've talked ad nauseum about what they like and what they don't like.
It's going to be a more even distribution than it is with a lot of teams because Burrow is who he is. DC, Lou Anarumo, who we love. We're just going to restate that. Not throwing any shade at him in the last section, more saying this was notable because it was different, because Lou wasn't killing people down the stretch. We kind of went, what's happening in Cincinnati? And took notice. That's it. We don't expect it to repeat. Special teams coordinator is Darren Simmons. On offense, other notable coaches. Frank Pollock is the offensive line coach and offensive run game coordinator. 18 seasons as an NFL coach. 5 of those coming in Cincinnati. He's been with the Bengals in the same capacity for the last 3 years. So, again, we have different personnel in the run game, but the same guy coordinating it. Troy Walters is the wide receivers coach. 5 seasons in Cincinnati. Last 4 as wide receivers coach. Guides one of the most talented wide receiver duos in the league at the top of the depth chart. Some changes a little bit farther down. But again, filling from within. It's not like they imported a bunch of free agents. They just have guys that, it's almost next man up right? Trenton Irwin was 4, now he's 3, and they're just going to keep moving folks up. So a lot of familiarity there, and they've had a ton of success. James Casey's the tight ends coach, 6th season in Cincinnati. Former Texans player who holds an NFL coaching job. I think it's pretty much like bootleg podcast law that we have to mention him.
Former Texans and former Bears. If there's a connection, we will find it.
Stamp it. And Justin Hill is the RB coach. 4th year with the Bengals coaching running backs. Before that, he was with Tulsa and coached Deneric Prince.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, how about that?
Another connection. On defense special teams, Mark Duffner, with the ubiquitous senior defensive assistant title, was a Bengals assistant way back in 1997 to 2002. Also served as Tampa's interim DC. I'd forgotten about this. For the last 11 games of 2018. He spent 22 years coaching in college before heading to the pros, 11 as a head coach between Maryland and Holy Cross. And then James Betcher is the linebackers coach. 3rd season as the Bengals linebacker coach, has helped guide Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson to be one of the best starting interior linebacking duos in the league. Whenever that happens, we're going to call out the coach who's responsible. That's James Betcher.
It's a very good staff, in particular very good at developing and drafting, but also developing. And I would say that's a big reason why the Bengals are the Bengals, because they've consistently developed the players that they've brought in, whether it's through free agency or the draft. And I don't just mean, first overall picks that would succeed anywhere, like Burrow, or top 5 picks that would succeed anywhere, like Jamar Chase, but it's also picking up T. Higgins on day 2. It's picking up Pratt. It's picking up Logan Wilson. It's the Trey Hendrickson, signing. That even at the time I was like, I don't know if I give him that much money.
It doesn't really move the needle.
So it kind of moves the needle a lot. Yeah. At the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to let Carl Lawson go. And then, of course, Hendrickson ends up out-producing Carl Lawson. So, again, these guys know what they're doing. The DJ Reader pickup once upon a time was phenomenal. He was great there for a long time. The Mims pick in the first round this year, which we'll talk about when we get to the draft, they absolutely nailed that pick. So, again, it's not the biggest group in terms of overall front office staff, support staff, coaching staff that you're going to see across the league. Like, there's some teams that have a lot more offices filled, but as far as still just getting the job done and nailing a lot of picks and nailing a lot of free agency signings and managing their cap well, like, this is a very well-run organization, and I want to give them their flowers for that.
Yeah, their division rivals get a lot of spotlight for this. The Ravens front office, and rightfully so, we say it pretty often, that power structure in the GM from Ozzie to Eric DeCosta has continued somewhat flawlessly, and we always say this, they draft and develop really well. I feel like the Bengals front office is like, oh yeah?
We do that too, guys.
Oh yeah?
We do exist.
Yeah. And
theme of the day.
They've done a tremendous job because of that strong handshake between Tobin and his staff and the coaching staff saying, what do we need to provide you so that you can build and develop these players? Again, understanding they're not on the budget of the Rams. They're not on the budget of the Falcons, right? Their team ownership does not have that kind of resource. So they need to be more creative. And they are and have been and continue to be, and it's one of the reasons they are so successful.
Well, with all that being said, talking about the coaching staff and whatever scheme dart throws we can throw based on limited information from 2 years ago, and everything else we've talked about so far, that does bring us to the Underdog Top 3, which, as you all know, if you've watched this entire series, is where we try to identify fantasy values for every single team. Not necessarily the best fantasy players, because they're all going super high, like, say, Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow. But
strange that.
Shocker. Yeah. Jamar Chase goes high in fantasy. Who knew?
Weird.
But we do try to identify the values for every single team based on the information that we laid out before. Bengals are a really interesting one because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you and I disagree on who might end up as wide receiver 3 for this team. Now, you brought up Trent Irwin before. I would like to throw my hat in the ring on behalf of Jermaine Burton, my guy.
Yep.
I had a top 10 receiver grade on him. Not top 10 overall pick. I mean, like one of the 10 best receivers in this class. But I had a huge grade on Jermaine Burton coming out. So far, early returns are good. I know it's just OTAs and mini camps and all that kind of stuff, but people say he looks the part. He was an incredible player at Alabama, very underrated, literally didn't drop a ball, despite having a very far average depth of target. His ADOT was like 21 yards or something.
20.8, yep.
Love him as a route runner. He's got legitimate juice to stretch the field. He can work in the red zone. Play him inside, play him outside. Like, I love Jermaine Burton, so I will get to him in just a second because he's going as like wide receiver, 70 right now, despite potentially being the number 3. But I want you to argue for your guy, Trent Irwin, before I get to Burton.
I think it's about role. I don't think it's about overall talent. If we're talking about who's more talented overall between Trent Irwin and Jermaine Burton, I think it's a very short conversation. I think Burton wins that in a landslide. But he is also a rookie, and it's where they're going to choose to line him up early and whether or not they're going to load him up with multiple roles or say, we're going to give you one role and have you learn that. There's a difference in development strategy among NFL teams. Some teams will take a rookie receiver, and again, different receivers, different approaches, and they'll give him everything, put everything on his plate and say, we're going to play you X, Y, Z, inside, outside, the whole thing. You're just going to learn it all. Other teams are very specific about, we are going to play you. We are going to designate you as an outside receiver. We are going to designate you as a number 2, however that works. And that's what you're going to learn. And once we feel like you have a pretty good handle on that as a rookie, we might expand your usage. We might, roll you inside. And so if the Bengals decide that they are going to primarily put Burton outside, which I think would be wise in some ways, he's not going to have a lot of opportunity, hopefully, again, if everybody stays healthy. If they roll him into the slot and it's an open competition, I still think Irwin has more familiarity with the system and is probably going to play a significant time early in the season. Might get overtaken later in the season as Burton develops. But again, I think it's kind of a slow start either way, either because the outside wide receivers stay healthy or Irwin with his experience starts in the slot.
Well, if Irwin ends up winning that job early and producing literally anything
at all,
it'll be the biggest value in this entire series that we've had the entire time because he literally doesn't have an ADP. So if EJ nails this call, it's the call of the century.
I think there's a decent chance because, again, this is promotion from within. He's already run the system. He had some flashes, but look, they had a very good, very established, one of the best wide receiver 3s in the league, who now has moved on as a free agent. The opening is there. The experience is there. Again, if we're talking about pure physical talent as a wide receiver, it's not close between Trent Irwin and Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton is a physical freak, played at Alabama for a reason. Irwin has familiarity not only with the system, but also with Burrow. So early returns to have him start in the slot, he's got a head start. Does he keep it? We'll see.
It's another one of these things that we're just going to have to wait for October and see how the chips fall. And we'll check back with you guys to see who actually is the wide receiver 3 here. Something that I think we do have a better handle on is running back. You and I both loved Chase Brown a lot when he was coming out of Illinois, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, off the top of my head. Very talented player, freak athlete. Speaking of freak athletes, he is a freak athlete. As far as build, speed, explosiveness, wiggle, he checked every single box from a physical perspective. The reason why he didn't go higher is because he just could not hold on to the football. Super high fumble rate. That was our concern with him. Of course, on 44 attempts as a rookie, he still had a fumble last year, but hey, one fumble in 44 attempts is still a pretty big improvement compared to his college fumble rate. So we'll take it. If he hangs onto the ball,
yep,
somebody who is this explosive, who showed that explosiveness in very limited action last year, I think RB37, which is his current valuation, is way, way, way too low. At minimum, we know that he's going to get the receiving work. And we also know, based on what we've talked about before, this team doesn't really use their running backs in protection unless they absolutely have to. They would prefer, on third down, their running back be a factor as a receiver. Chase Brown is that factor as a receiver, so we think he's going to get third down looks. If Chase Brown does not fumble, RB37 is way too low. In fact, I would think he's probably going to be in the top 24.
It'll be fascinating to see. I'm with you on the receiving. He had those chops coming out of Illinois. His explosiveness in space is really impressive. Just physical build and body control melded together in one package. He has as much athletic ability as anybody in their running back room, and that's somebody coming from somebody who's a Travion Williams truther. Like,
one of these years, it'll work out.
He turned him into a special teams player, and he excelled there, so good for him. But, Zach Moss, I would say, is probably being overdrafted just because people are penciling him in as number one, and I think he will be steady, just like he has been for the rest of his career. I do not think he will be necessarily explosive. I do not think he's going to be egregiously productive. So again, if you're looking for a slice of value, the gamble on Chase Brown, based largely on the fact that he is going to get those third down looks and is a good receiver, and the Bengals like to use their running backs as receivers, is a decent shot to take.
And then, of course, you got Mike Gesicki, who's all the way down at TE27.
Okay.
That's mainly just because I think people look at all the receivers and they look at Brown and are like, oh, he's going to be fifth in the pecking order. Here's the thing, though. In the area of the field where it matters, the red zone, he ain't going to be fifth.
And not so fast, folks. This is the one I'm going to dig in on because Gesicki's had a rough couple of years now, almost 3 years, going back to his early time in Miami, Mike McDaniel, and they wanted him to do something very different. He tried to do it.
i.e. literally blocking anybody. Yeah.
It didn't work out. They traded him. He had some success in New England, but the Bengals have used their tight ends as receivers as much or more than a lot of teams in the NFL. And Gesicki's kind of out of sight, out of mind. He hasn't gotten worse necessarily as a player. He still is who he is. And in his early life in the NFL, he was very effective in that role. I agree with you that when he gets back to doing that, especially in the area of the field, is a tall, athletic target that's very good in the red zone and down the seams. Burrow can throw that ball. I think Gesicki's going to have a really nice rebound, and I think his current ADP is too low.
See, there is value here. There are some elite offenses that actually have fantasy values. Philly, no. San Francisco, no. KC, sort of. Bengals, though, you are going to get values. You just have to look past the obvious ones at the top of Burrow and Chase. I mean, shit, even T is wide receiver 27, something like that. So, Bengals are kind of odd, and I think it's because they're that forgotten AFC powerhouse that nobody's been paying attention to, even though they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender, that it's even trickled into fantasy. People just aren't drafting their good players, and it makes no sense to me. The Texans have 3 receivers in the top 40, but not Cincinnati. I don't know, man. It's odd.
Yeah, we'll see. I would take the bet on T that he's going to outperform that ADP. I would definitely take Gesicki. Chase Brown, end of a few drafts for fun. That's where I'd be looking for that value. But Gesicki, I have a strong feeling is going to outperform where people are currently looking at him, and it's just because of new destination, a little bit of cooling because the offense wasn't great last year with Burrow out. It's just a combination of factors that I think people are overlooking him. And again, we'll see. Maybe he is truly past his prime and will never regain that. I don't believe that.
By the time this episode comes out, again, some of these ADPs might have swung wildly based on camp hype and all that. So I do encourage you guys to go check out Underdog right now to see where those ADPs have swung to. Who knows? Jermaine Burton might be going as wide receiver 45 now instead of 70. And Trent Irwin might be drafted, period. We'll see.
You moving lines, Coleman?
If only I had that much power.
If only.
Maybe one day. But again, go check that out at the QR code on the screen or the link in the description. You can see where they're currently at before we manifest them to being higher than they are. All right, let's get to March. Again, we talked up this front office and how they've handled free agency in years past, spending smart money and, maintaining, roster integrity. I guess, despite some financial challenges. Like they're pretty good at it. So let's have you take the lead in free agency. They did lose some guys, but we'll talk about how they replaced them as well.
Big three here that we have to lead off with in terms of guys that have made a large positive difference for the Bengals, who are no longer Bengals. It's Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, and DJ Reader.
100%.
Those are large names who have contributed on their sides of the ball, respectively, hugely to the success the Bengals have had in recent years. They are no longer there. Boyd is a Titan, Joe Mixon is a Texan, and DJ Reader has joined the Lions, which I hate, by the way. He's an incredibly quality player. Do not want to go against that guy on a very talented defensive line. Anyways, it's one of those additions you see a division rival make and you go, damn it. Really? Couldn't he have gone anywhere else? So
this is EJ's Bears reference without being a Bears reference for the show. So again, if you're out there keeping track, now's your time to drink.
A half shot, because I avoided that masterfully. You talked about Awuzie moving on at corner. He also is a Titan. Nick Scott, the safety, goes to the Panthers. Jonah Williams, contributor. I will just say contributor.
Addition by subtraction.
Correct. Is now a Cardinal. Irv Smith Jr., who is a favorite of ours, has moved on to the Chiefs. We'll put all the rest of the names on the screen, but those are the big ones, and really those big three. Those are the kind of losses successful teams have to take or have to choose, is what I'll say. Because it's not like they wanted to live without Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is and was very good at his role. They decided they didn't want to ante up to pay for that. They were going to let another team do it and, again, promote young talent from within. DJ Reader, same thing. What side of the ball do we want to spend money on? Reader was going to be expensive. They had to choose to spend that money there or elsewhere. They did not. So these are – I'm not going to take shots at the front office for saying you should have kept or pound the table. I'm saying these are the choices you have to make when you are a good team with very good players who are going to get paid near the top of the scale. You can't pay them all. These are the choices they made.
And it's a choice you have to make when your quarterback makes $55 million and your receiver is about to make 35 plus, and you have another receiver who wants to make 30, which is not going to happen. Like, let's be real. This is teased last year.
Yep.
It is what it is. But these are the tough decisions that you got to make. You got a really good edge rusher. You got really good receivers. You got a really good quarterback. Sorry, it's the price of being good.
It's got to go somewhere, and it can't go everywhere. And it's not that they weren't good players or didn't perform well. Bengals fans know otherwise. They just can't all stay.
As far as who they did retain, T. Higgins is back on the franchise tag at $21.8 million, which, considering the current receiver market for a year, okay.
Solid value.
Solid value for his likely last year in Cincinnati. Drew Sample brought him back at $3.5 million. Travion Williams, special teams extraordinaire, brought back at a cool 1.3. Jake Browning, who proved his worth last year as Burrow's backup. Again, is he ever going to be considered a long-term starting caliber quarterback? No. But can he get you through a rough stretch of games if Joe goes down? Clearly, yes. Like, they were winning with him. They won 9 games, for God's sake. So he's worth his weight in gold. You're only as good as your backup quarterback, especially when your starting quarterback has had some injuries in the past. So for him to get, was it less than $1 million? I mean, God, that's a hell of a deal for them. And then in terms of third-party additions, Zach Moss, who you mentioned, brought in at $4 million. So what is he, 20% of top of market? That's pretty decent for a guy who's going to likely get most of your goal line work, short yardage work, while Chase Brown does all the explosive stuff in between the 20s. Von Bell. I feel like Von Bell's been on and off this roster like 3 times at this point, but he's back again. $1.2 million. Trent Brown, you're not allowed to play tackle for the Bengals apparently unless you're 6'8". So he's here at $4.5 million. Mike Gesicki, we talked about at $2.5. Geno Stone, plucked from the Ravens, ball hawk extraordinaire. Really good pickup for them. He's going to start immediately at $7 million. And then Sheldon Rankins. Is he going to replace DJ Reader? No. Can he do all the things that DJ Reader can do? No. But if you're looking at that deal, 12.25 for an interior pass rusher who can line up next to Trey and go hunt once Joe gets them a lead, I would say that's a pretty good deal. Again, he's not as complete a player as DJ, and let's be honest, if DJ was healthy, he would have gotten a hell of a lot more money than this. DJ only ended up getting like $11 million. But for what he is as a role player, I like that pickup a lot.
I think it fits with the overall sort of ethos of the Bengals of we're going to pick up things we need and we are going to get out of deals at the end of them before they get expensive. I think the Bengals are the exact opposite of like what the Arizona Cardinals were in the 90s, right? We're just going to collect all the stars past their prime to try and sell tickets. And
Cardinals legend Emmitt Smith.
That's correct. Yeah. The Bengals are the opposite of that. They'll maybe get out a year too early and say, hey, again, we can get another guy that's available in the pool or via trade or any other number of ways to build our team that is going to approximate most of that, all of that, no, at a similar price that's not going to inflate as the deal goes on. And we're good with that because we'll build around that through the draft and development largely.
And let's be honest, the other half of the pie, opposite Sheldon Rankins, you know, the DJ Reader pie that you have to replace. I kind of go back to like that Moneyball quote of like, well, we can't replace DJ Reader with one guy, but we can replace him in the aggregate.
Right.
The other half of that aggregate they got in the draft with Chris Jenkins, which is a good segue to us looking at their entire draft class. Because again, for God, how many years in a row now? We look at this Bengals class and we say, love that pick, love that pick, love that pick. Oh, God damn, that's a great pick. Oh, my God, they got him in the 6th round, like over and over and over again. I'm looking at 7th round centers for this class that I'm drooling over. Mm-hmm. So once again, the Bengals crushed it.
Yeah, sifting through the deep sands of the draft and coming up with a bunch of gems. Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, the incredibly gifted tackle from Georgia, we should say. 1st round, 18th pick overall. You mentioned him earlier. Absolute man-child of a player. Low on experience, not low on traits, talent, or tape. When he was on the field, his tape was super impressive. So a lot of people said project. Incorrectly applied label. Inexperienced? Yes. Young? Yes. Room to grow, which is super scary? Also, yes. So altogether, no. Theoretical ceiling? Damn near unlimited.
His theoretical ceiling is John Ogden.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're talking about here as far as physical profile.
Yeah.
And I kind of liken him to Anthony Richardson when he was coming out, which I know is a different position, entirely different team, but just go with me on this. People kept saying, Anthony Richardson's raw. You're going to have to teach him a lot. He's going to have to sit for a while. No. Anthony Richardson was not raw. He was inexperienced. Those are two very different things. You can have not a lot of snaps under your belt, but still know what the hell you're doing. Amarius Mims did not have a lot of snaps, but he knew what the hell he was doing. As far as like true drop back pass protection reps, no play action, no RPO, like not just a one-step drop. I'm talking like real drop back passing game. He only had like 135 of those across the last 2 seasons. He gave up nothing. Again, small sample size, but you watch those reps, and I did. I went through all of them. I can't tell you how many times in my notes it was just like 2 words of "good God," Jesus Christ. That's murder. Like just like he was the easiest guy to grade out of anybody, at least among the tackle class, because A, it didn't take very long, but B, every single note it was like superhero stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He is crazy good. I'm actually kind of surprised he didn't go higher than this. I think some teams probably had some thresholds in terms of total snap counts that they were looking for, but I think the Bengals were just like, well, I don't know, he seems pretty good. Let's just get him in the building.
Let's just keep him healthy and get him on the field, and we certainly want to see that. In the 2nd round, 49th pick overall, Chris Jenkins, the incredibly physically talented interior defender from Michigan who broke all kinds of strength records there, was a high-level run defender at Michigan, and I think his upside is pass rush. He did not have a lot of demonstrated pass rush wins at Michigan, at least not to the level that are going to translate to the NFL. Does that mean he can't do it? No. That means he hasn't done it yet, but he has all the physical attributes to do that. And this is, again, leaning heavily into the Bengals' theory of draft and develop. They've drafted, and now it's their job to develop to get the other part of the aggregate for what they gave up in DJ Reader with an incredibly talented interior defensive lineman from the national champion Wolverines. I have to say that because Rich is right over there, and if I don't, he'll come and find me and hunt me down. Jermaine Burton, the wide receiver from Alabama, just an insane statistical profile in terms of, his average depth of target is 20 yards.
And no drops, crazy high contested catch rate. Worked inside, worked outside. Like, he's the only receiver outside of, like, the top guys in the class, Marvin, Rome, all them. He was the only receiver that looked like that from an analytics perspective. He is so crazy rare. And again, the only reason he went as late as he did was because of some other stuff that didn't have anything to do with playing football. And again, I'm not excusing it. He is a hothead. He's got some Golden Tate to him in more ways than one. But damn, he can play football.
We shall see. Again, Bengals look at him and go, seems pretty good. I think we can deal with the issues, especially in the third round. They get him at the 80th overall pick. McKinley Jackson, interior defensive line from Texas A&M. They get again in the third round, 17 picks later at 97. Massive human being.
They have a type.
Indeed. Eric All, the tight end from Iowa, they get in the fourth round at 115. I think this is a sneaky good pickup. Now, it says Iowa, again, he started at Michigan. He is a particular type. He's very much like Gesicki. He is really tall. He has a athletic. He is a seam ripper. Didn't get a ton of those chances at Iowa. And I think he struggled with injury, some scary ones, but was cleared medically before the draft. That definitely turned some teams off. This is a value in the fourth round. I actually thought he might go later because of those concerns, not because of talent. Really cool story, really cool player. Again, fully rounded tight end, fully faceted tight end. No, very good at some things that are very reminiscent of what Gesicki did at the top of his game. Yep, and they got him all the way down in the fourth round. Josh Newton, the corner from TCU, super aggressive. One of the most fun studies in all of Draft'em this year in the fifth round at 149. Feisty with a capital F.
He's kind of got some L'Jarius Sneed to him. Not the same physical build, but as far as play style, of just he's going to show up and try to fight somebody.
Correct.
In a good way.
Yes, every single down. Now, Tanner McLaughlin, they go back to the tight end pool from Arizona in the sixth round at 194. I think equated him to a 60s muscle car in my write-up.
It can go one direction really fast.
Really fast, a lot of power. Not so great in the turn, but he does have some subtle movements. I got some pushback from Arizona fans who said, no, you're missing the forest for the trees. There are some things there that you see, and he does make subtle movements after the catch. I'm going to tell you this. Go back and look at the tape. He is huge. He does have a very large catch radius. He is largely linear, but he's got these little movements after he catches the ball that allow him to be way more elusive than anybody at his size should be.
It's like that. Did you ever see that Family Guy Blue Harvest? It's like, we're going to list lazily to the left. We can't hit him. He's listing lazily to the left. That's Tanner McLaughlin.
Maybe not lazily, but yes, I'm with you. Cedric Johnson, the edge from Mississippi in the sixth round, I think is a steal. This guy we saw work out at the combine on the field, and you were like, who is that? And I was like, that's Ced Johnson. Like, a lot of talent, SEC edge defender, didn't necessarily have all the production that you wanted, but when you look at the wow rushes, you look at the flash rushes where he did have production, you go, holy sh! Like,
it looks good.
Looks really good. If they can unlock some of that, Cincinnati's going to have a gem on their defensive line. Deshaun Anthony, the safety from Mississippi, in the seventh round at 224. And then the aforementioned seventh round center, who I think was the best pass blocking center in this draft, is Matt Lee from Miami, seventh round at 237. Does not have a balanced game and does not look the part. Might be the most body unbeautiful center that I've seen in quite some time, but the tape is gorgeous.
And I think the Matt Lee pick specifically is what really kind of reinforces my thoughts on the Bengals front office, which is they care about tape.
Correct.
You know, you look at Mims, not a big sample size, but the tape's good. You look at Sed Johnson, the tape's good. You look at Jermaine Burton, the tape's good. You look at Matt Lee, testing-wise, build-wise, it's nothing special. You look at the tape and you're like, oh my God, nobody can beat him. And he went up against some really, really good interior pass rushers in the ACC, and nobody could beat him.
And if you mark off their worst games, they're all against Miami.
All against Matt Lee.
And you're like, what's the thread here? Oh, maybe Matt Lee is really good.
They might not have a robust analytics department in Cincinnati, but they know what good football players look like. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as those guys are drafting for this team, they're going to end up with good classes like this one. It has consistently been true. I'm not saying they're perfect. They've had some picks that were, even for me at the time, okay, we see things differently. But for the most part, I see a lot of their picks the same way they do. And I feel like I grade tape very similarly to how they grade, just because I like a lot of the guys they always pick. So, again, I love this draft class. Their UDFA haul, they also had some pretty notable additions in there. Rocky Lombardi, I just want to bring him up just because all-name team. And I feel like NIU is somehow a quarterback factory in the NFL over the last 15 years or so. Every few years, one comes out. He's another one. Again, he might make practice squad, maybe at best, but he's probably a camp arm. Either way, great name. Cole Burgess, the wide receiver out of Cortland State, had a lot of hype probably later in the pre-draft process. Around April is when you started seeing a lot of people say his name. I thought he could have gone later on day 3. They ended up getting him as a UDFA. Justin Blazik out of Wisconsin Platteville. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Owen Reese, our buddy. Wisconsin Platteville's on the board, EJ.
That's correct. They have scored. Owen's scouting report on Justin is very favorable. Obviously, powerful guy, quick twitch. He says he's also a great guy. Hopes he get a shot. Was very productive at Platteville.
And then, speaking of Wisconsin, there's actually a Wisconsin linebacker that I did not get to, but you highlighted him. So I'm going to let you do the attempt at the name because I definitely would not get it correct.
I'm going to go with Mema Jongmeta.
Okay. Chat, you can fact check us.
I could be completely off. Athletic, hybrid linebacker, edge rusher profile, super twitchy, rocked up. Has a ways to go. I don't want to say, I'll say raw, right? In terms of physical profile, and he does win. He's going to need to win with more polish at the NFL level. That's what he's going to have to develop if he's going to get regular snaps. But in terms of, betting on a ball of clay that's got a lot of potential, you could do a lot worse.
That brings us to our final segment of this show, which is answering 2 questions. The first of which is, did this team get better or worse or roughly stay the same through all the additions and subtractions added together? This is a interesting case because the Bengals had a lot of work to do just to stay treading water, right? To manage the losses that we knew were coming based on just basic salary cap management. We knew they were going to lose some guys, some good players, and they were going to have to do a lot of work to replace those guys and just maintain that level that they already are, which is a top probably 6 to 8 team in the NFL, any way you slice it. I do think that they did that. So thumbs even is going to sound like a negative, but really it's a positive because they had to nail this offseason just to stay even, and they did, which means if they're even, they're still a Super Bowl contender. That is a compliment, folks.
Correct. I came up with the same ranking. They had a lot of work to do. They had significant losses, and they managed, in my mind, to keep the talent shelf even, which keeps them competitive. With the return of a healthy Joe Burrow, I think they're going to make a lot of national pundits who have neglected to say their name all summer eat that silence.
In terms of ceiling and floor, then, I mean, it's pretty easy for me. I don't know about you. I look at this team that won 9 games last year when they absolutely should not have won 9 games.
Correct.
And I say, healthy Joe Burrow's probably worth an extra 3. So I'm going to go a ceiling of 12 and a floor. And again, we don't count quarterback injuries in terms of floor. A floor with a healthy Joe Burrow of 10. And that is if everything else goes wrong. Not quarterback injury, but everything else. Like, let's say they really can't run the ball without Joe Mixon. Let's say Burton and Irwin, neither of them really emerge as wide receiver 3. Let's say that the impact of DJ Reader's loss is too much to overcome. You know, maybe DJ Turner doesn't turn it around. Maybe everybody except Cam Taylor-Britt can't cover in man again. If everything goes wrong at the same time, they're probably only going to be a 10-win team, which sounds disastrous. But again, that's a compliment, folks. This is a very good team to the point where I think no matter what, they're double-digit wins.
My projections are really similar. Ceiling of 12 and certainly in the mix at the end of the year for top spot in the AFC once they get into the playoffs. I think their floor is 9, and my reasoning for that is a little bit different than yours. It's not if everything goes wrong all at once. If it's half of it goes wrong in the first half of the season and the other half goes wrong in the second half of the season. The defense can't pull it together. Lou makes his adjustments, which I am sure he will, and evens out that ship, and the defense starts playing well in the second half. But the offense can't gel early on. They get behind in terms of wins and losses and are then playing to try and race to the end. Again, no lower than last season, which we think is the absolute floor with no Joe Burrow for most of the year. I can't see them not winning 9 games. So it's 12 and 9 for me.
Well, hopefully Bengals fans, this last hour or so, or hour and a half, however long this episode ends up being, hopefully you guys found this entertaining, and I hope you appreciate that somebody outside of Cincinnati actually acknowledges you exist.
Or fashion media.
I mean, it's ridiculous how a Super Bowl contending team just doesn't get talked about. The only time anybody talks about the Bengals is like when Joe Burrow does a podcast. I'm like, guys, they're a good team. What are we doing here? Anyway, hope you guys appreciated this look at your own team. Or if you're not a Bengals fan, I hope you guys appreciated this little primer on what's been happening in Cincinnati for the last 8 months or so. If you want to check out Bengals gear or bootleg gear or any other NFL gear, you can go to our clothing partner, Homage, at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. Whatever you guys get, whether it's NFL stuff or our stuff. We get a cut of the proceeds at anything you buy at that link. Doesn't even have to be football related, but we get a cut of it. So it's a good way to passively support the show. Thank you once again to Underdog. Thank you to all of our patrons, especially at the executive producer tier in the Ring of Honor. We appreciate all of you guys as well. We are back tomorrow with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, right? Yes, Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, keeping track of the AFC North is tough because they all finished within like 2 games of each other, but yes, another good AFC North team is coming tomorrow. I'm assuming it's Pittsburgh, but if not, we'll see you with something else later.